The above statements show not only his willingness and perseverance, but also his emphasis on perspicuity. In the Tractatus, Wittgenstein's emphasis was on the perspicuous representation of reality to obtain epistemic clarity. Moreover, the aspiration in the above statements exhibits his honesty and humility. Over and above, Wittgenstein shows that self knowledge is essential to draw the limit concerning the clarity of thought and expression on which one needs to act. The concept of limit in the Tractatus has shown the transcendental nature of logic and language. But more importantly, the notion of transcendence here is drawing in thinking. The notion of self knowledge discloses that this deep insight transparently, as Okil emphatically suggests, the reactive and evaluative attitudes are expressed with responsibility. The notion of responsibility and commitment brings out a normative element of self knowledge. More importantly, the normative attitude of seeking and being willing to see beyond the limit of the given is voiced through the thinking self. Thus, the notion of self in the Tractatus has a metaphysical bearing, the transcending element of conceptualizing the ontology of the self that involves self knowledge and integrity. The profundity of ethics in life receives a transcendental status in the Tractatus. Ethics is concerned with higher values of life which are difficult to define. Uh, Professor Pradhan, referring to wise men, writes, I quote, Wittgenstein goes to the extent of saying that ethics identifies the good with the divine, that is, that which takes the good as what it divinely ordered. Good is what God orders, unquote. The presence of the divine and its expression is essentially related to life, and its description exports us to the realm of the mystical. The evidence of this description of the relationship between the ethical and the mystical came when he used to give lectures at Vienna, and during his lectures he would turn and read poems of Rabindranath Tagore. The poetic expression of Tagore's Gitanjali expresses a mystical outlook of life. Um, the aesthetic experience of reading the narration of the beauty of nature in Gitanjali might have been the driving force to justify this claim that ethics and aesthetics follow the same line of transcendence as in logic. To conclude, considering the above points of discussion, Wittgenstein's concern for ethics in particular and philosophy in general opened a new direction altogether, which continues to attract the attention of many intellectuals from the varied philosophical backgrounds and traditions. The Tractatus thus has obtained the status of classics in philosophy and for all lovers of knowledge, while highlighting the significance of integrating logical and the ethical thinking. Wittgenstein's emphasis was on the transcendental nature of values. Truth and good are dealt in logic and ethics respectively, where he appeals to understand the grammar of language in which values are expressed. Language is the only medium of representation that relates to the world and also transcends it. The transcendental viewpoint underlies to view the world as subspecie aeterni. This linguistic engagement, in a way, determines what can be said and what is inexpressible. Values remain inexpressible in the sense that they are beyond facts, beyond in the realm of facts. The inexpressible refers to something higher, the mystical that belongs to the realm of silence. What lies in the realm of silence is not well articulated thought, but it's rather something that is being felt, that is in the form of feeling. Its content could be realized but not expressed in words or language. The notion of the mystical as a part of the experiential aspect of life does contribute to the meaning of life. These experiences are transcendental because they show something beyond the realm of the factual. Philosophy, as a critique of language, does not dismiss the inexpressible, but rather puts the values in the domain of human understanding. In this connection, philosophy ought to be reflective, which carries the conscious spirit, the spirit of critiquing through which he looks for a conscious solution, emphasizes the limits of language. This is with reference to Hecker's notion of understanding, how philosophy is about human understanding. Uh, in this connection, both Dillman and Hecker draw a parallel between Kant and Wittgenstein to highlight the notion of Copernican revolution in philosophy. Wittgenstein critiqued his conception of language, which he maintained in Tractatus with relation to the world and the notion of affable and ineffable. As Tillman writes, I quote, he, Wittgenstein, moves towards his Copernican revolution through a struggle to clear early work, Tractatus Logico Philosophicus. This is no ordinary realism. It consists of thinking of human languages, natural languages, as eternally related to and indeed measured by language and logic, independent of human life. It is almost Platonic realism. He dismantles this realism with his introduction of the notion of language games. In this way, he decentralizes language, connects it with the human action, moves away from its idealization, and reconciles himself with resting on the rough ground. It is a tremendous achievement, the likes of which I find it hard to think of in philosophy. Unquote. This shift shows Wittgenstein's reflective thinking while involving oneself in doing uh, critical philosophy. The Tractatus thus renews a dialogical culture of philosophy, considering philosophy as an activity. Wittgenstein not only differed from the positivist alone, but also tried to show his resentment towards his own work by contributing immensely to the idea that philosophy, as an autonomous discipline of knowledge, contributes to the enrichment of life. Language ultimately finds its space in life. Language is part of our life. Wittgenstein's unwritten aspects of the Tractatus reveal how ethics is inevitable in everyday life, and his appeal is on the same of um, line as Socrates' slogan that an unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates was known for his love of wisdom while elucidating the attitude of the wise. Ramin Zahanveglo writes, I quote, to be wise is to see the cruelty of fate, but also be able to surpass it. A wise human being knows how to live simply and be independent minded. Unquote. Wittgenstein, after the war, retired to a simple life while taking up a job at kindergarten school in a remote village at Tattenberg, far from Vienna city. He did discontinue after a few years of teaching there in the school, but that could be another episode of his struggle in life so far as his adherence to perfection and ethics is concerned. Nevertheless, he remained independent minded and continued writing philosophical thoughts that are posthumously published. Among the later published work, philosophical investigation is considered at par with Tractatus in its content and provided an alternative philosophical perspective of meaning firmly established in ordinary language philosophy. The philosophical wisdom of Ludwig Wittgenstein is undoubtedly evident in his writings, which revolutionized the history of philosophy and showed a new way of philosophizing. All this happened during a difficult time. The first, he left his career in engineering, joined Cambridge to study mathematical logic and philosophy, which might have been very challenging because he wished to contribute significantly. Secondly, his philosophical thoughts were articulated while being on the war field and as a prisoner of war. During those difficult times, Wittgenstein has shown incredible moral courage and commitment to humanity. He took philosophizing as an activity in the true spirit which will contribute to living a meaningful life. While illustrating this kind of revolutionary attitude of a philosopher, Olson mentions that, I quote, philosophers try to bring new philosophical method based on a new philosophical attitude, unquote. Like many original philosophers such as Plato, Aristotle, Descartes, Kant, and Marx, he also critiqued and refuted many philosophical ideals and perspectives and marked a change in the history of 20th century philosophy. And as an independent thinker, he articulated his philosophical thoughts with a great sense of freedom and was not apologetic or defensive about philosophical positions. He instead continued working as a lover of wisdom. Wittgenstein's philosophical aspiration is not filled with vulgar curiosity, but as Russell says, referring to Socrates and Plato, that the vision of truth must guide philosophers as wise, unquote. Wittgenstein's vision of truth can be compared with an intimate union of thought and feeling, but not entirely intellectual. His philosophical vision, or darsana, as it is termed in Indian philosophical tradition, was imbibed with the spirit of seeking the good and the divine. Wittgenstein, in his Tractatus, shows the union between the purity of thought and the purity of heart, the union where the logical and the ethical were harmoniously and intuitively synthesized in his life. Thank you. It ends here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your talk. And now I would request Professor Pradhan to give his comments, and then we will discuss. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you, Ranjan, for this enlightening discourse on Wittgenstein's philosophy and life. As you have rightly pointed out, that the Tractatus was not merely an intellectual exercise for him. It was perhaps a philosophical exercise. So you have with rich details about his life in the Tractatus days, and especially the war background have really added to the new understanding of the Tractatus. Unless we relate Wittgenstein and his book with his life, I think we will miss the very significant remarks that he has made about everything, including life, its purpose, and its meaning, etc. What we have missed, for example, in the so-called resolute reading of Tractatus and similar kind of exercise, that we have forgotten that Tractatus itself emerged out of an existential context. As Professor Panda has very rightly pointed out, that Tractatus would not have taken the shape it has taken had not Wittgenstein lived a very, very ethically and spiritually rich life. So in that sense, I think your talk is, and your ideas about Wittgenstein's work are very pertinent, and they are deeply related to what Wittgenstein really wanted to say, but for philosophical reasons he could not say. So the idea of unwritten part, for the ordinary reader, it may look as if Wittgenstein left something unwritten, but actually one has to go, as you have rightly referred back to his letter to Ludwig von Ficker. because that is the source, that letter is the source of the idea of the unwritten part. In the Tractatus, there is no mention of the idea of an unwritten part, but only that letter reveals that something to say that he has left it uh, in a sense unwritten and unsaid. This letter is significant for many, many reasons. And I think this is one of the profoundest letters that he has ever written concerning his own book. That letter has to be read and reread in order to understand Tractatus. This is my personal feeling, and I thank you for bringing that letter to the focus. Earlier in one of the lectures, there was a mention about the motto, which says that what things can be said in so many words can be said in a few words or in 3 words, something exactly that means. That Wittgenstein is saying in so many words that there are many things which you cannot say, which cannot be said. And the Tractatus itself makes that distinction, what can be said and what cannot be said. That unwritten part is related to what cannot be said, therefore what cannot be written. In a sense, had Wittgenstein added these few sentences to his original foreword, perhaps it would have made the same thing, that there are things about which the author is committed to be silent. So the Tractatus rightly concludes with this profound remark that things that cannot be said must be passed over in silence. His unwritten part is really refers to this, which cannot be said. So that is really a profound context in which you have contextualized the whole of the Tractatus. If the context is missing, a text may be missed also. That is the pathetic fate of many of the texts, which are taken out of context by the later readers. We read our thought into the book, into the text, and we never allow the text to speak for itself. Why Wittgenstein has been, why the Tractatus has not been allowed to speak for itself, that is very surprising. The positivists imposed their ideas on the Tractatus, they failed. Then there are others, including the present resolute readers, they also impose their ideas. We have no right to impose our ideas on the book. Let the book speak for itself. And that's why your discourse on the Tractatus is eye-opening in the sense that we must allow the text to speak of itself and also to allow the author to speak through his text. So the author is not dead in that sense, as the postmodernists say. The author is dead. The text speaks. In a sense, it is right, but here the author is also speaking to the text. So I believe that your understanding of the text is by contextualizing it to his life. You have made a very good move to understand the Tractatus in the right spirit. In fact, I agree with all that you have said, so I have no disagreement. But 1 or 2 points, I think, for the discussion we must take on. One is the very apt remark about his fellow men in the war front. He's the man with a gospel. I think that was the most appropriate description of a man who was in desperate need of spiritual solace, which he got through Tolstoy's book, the Gospel in Brief. That book is symbolic. He could have read any other text as well, just as Schopenhauer has read the Upanishads for spiritual solace. Had the Upanishads come to his hand in that Faithful Bookshop. I think where he got this book. That was the only good book in that bookshelf or bookshop. So it would have meant the same, that he was in need of spiritual solace. I think you have mentioned to one of the prayers, some of the diaries somewhere. He wanted solace. He was in spiritual pain, really, not only because of the war and the fear of death. In fact, he had overcome the fear of death. As he mentioned that he can die anytime. And as he also said that anybody who is fearful of death is leading a false life. That is remarkably true about his own self. Every moment in the war front he was expecting death. But he had overcome death because of his spiritual realization that there is a spiritual sense of life which cannot be killed, which cannot be dead. Or there is a larger understanding of life which cannot be just washed away by death. So he admitted the reality of death, but he also philosophized over it. And as he said in the Tractatus, death doesn't occur in life. So one need not fear death, because when you are dead, there is nothing that you can know that you are dead. So there is no pain in death. So these are some of the things which should be highlighted. And the man with a gospel, I think this is the best imagery of Wittgenstein, not only in the Tractatus days. I think this was true of his entire life. In his later works, whatever he might have written about, he might not have written in the same spirit about spirituality, except in the glimpses that we get from his culture and value and his discourse with his friends. That means this image of the man with the gospel remains stuck to him because he ever needed spiritual solace. And philosophy for him was, in a sense, an explicit understanding of life in the light of the divine. In the light of the divine. The notion of divine becomes important. That is what I want to emphasize. Why he called good divine? No serious ethical thinker now will take this statement of Wittgenstein with a kind attention. Everybody will say in the present context, when divinity has receded from the mind of the human beings, it may be in some mind, but it is not in the popular mind. Divinity is an obnoxious, anachronistic word for many of us. Why Wittgenstein, while discussing good, instead of saying like Moore that it is indefinable, he should have said it is divine. So that statement, if you read in the Culture and Value more closely, it says, "This sums up my ethics. Good is divine." Then the next sentence is, "This sums up my ethics." Such a tremendous statement has fallen flat on the contemporary years because we find no meaning in it. Either the notion of good is deplatonized, naturalized, relativized, thrown into dustbin, and ethics has become a more popular discourse about what we can do in the next moment of life, and not from life seen from the eternity point of view. Wittgenstein had that concept of life. Life can be seen sub specie eternitatis. How many of us will now consider this as a very meaningful statement, unless we invoke Spinoza and get back to the old mode of thinking? And many of us are out to say that we are in a classical mode of thinking. This is not contemporary mode of thinking. And I have heard people saying that this is that these are old ways of thinking, as if philosophy of the olden days are gone, and philosophy of the new people is the only philosophy. Perhaps if this kind of reading goes on, then Wittgenstein will be out of context, will be out of time. But is he that? These are the moments, these are the questions which as students of philosophy must address. Can we say that Wittgenstein's statements about divinity and the good, spiritual life, ethical life, the ethical understanding of the world itself, are they all irrelevant questions now from a contemporary point of view? So these are the questions which by reading Wittgenstein, we are reminded of the fact that philosophy, whether of Plato or Socrates, as you have profusely referred to Socrates, are they all dead? Should we live our life without Plato in the Western context, without Upanishads, or any of the Indian texts in our context? Should philosophy be detached from the past and should only be short-sighted to confine itself to what is happening now? So this is the major understanding that we get from the Tractatus. By understanding Tractatus, we are renewing our commitment to understand life in a better way. Come what may, whatever may others say, whatever may the so-called contemporary thinkers say, we must understand the text in the right spirit. That will be the search for truth, and not for a contemporary truth. Truth is neither contemporary nor classical. Truth is truth. It is eternal. So life, in that sense, in a larger perspective, it will be life seen sub spec eternitatis. From the eternity point of view, which other point of view Wittgenstein would have accepted? Not a temporal point of view, because that would not have made him a great philosopher. He would have been the philosopher of his time. But let us remind ourselves of the fact that Wittgenstein was not a philosopher of his time. He is a philosopher of all time. So in that sense, I will say every great philosopher is also a philosopher of all times. Not only he, any great philosopher. Only those who write for their own time, they are lesser philosophers and they are easily forgotten. But these great stalwarts of human thought can never be forgotten, because whenever anybody reads Tractatus, he will be reminded of the divine, he will be reminded of the good, he will be reminded of Wittgenstein, the man with a gospel. So I conclude by saying that I am very much enlightened and thrilled by your delving into the details of his life situation. That is the best part of our exercise into understanding the Tractatus. Tractatus will continue to be discussed even after hundreds of years. I think that is how philosophy is being discussed. Plato, which belongs to where, and we are discussing now. So in that sense, he will be discussed always and ever, as long as the human mind remains as it is. If human mind becomes post-human mind, there is a notion of post-human mind, when it will become a mere machine. I wish God doesn't allow this to happen. Let human mind remain as it is, aspiring for the divine. Okay, if the human mind really aspires for the divine, then Wittgenstein will be standing there with his gospel and showing the way that forget about what is happening now. Look to that which is eternal. I think with these words, I again thank you for giving this enlightening lecture. I think everybody will appreciate your effort. And there will be many questions, of course. So I thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So the session is open now for questions and discussions.
So, Samasri, can you
No,
hear Samasri?
yeah.
Yes, please talk.
No, no, yeah, I can set the ball rolling, but I do not have any question as such. But I
Yeah.
was wondering
What are
whether,
your thoughts? That is important.
yeah, I'll just start because I was just wondering whether Wittgenstein was totally immersed in this existential crisis. And I find that the similarity with Husserl also regarding the existential crisis which Husserl faced at that point of time. So here also there is a similarity between Husserl and Wittgenstein during the First World War. So that is one thing. And secondly, whether Wittgenstein had seriously thought of death as a metaphysical event. I mean, I was just wondering whether Ranjan would comment on what Wittgenstein thought on death as a metaphysical event. I do not know. I know this does not constitute what he said today, but I was just wondering whether he really
I think,
thought,
yeah,
whether you
I
can
think
just
Wittgenstein was more inclined towards liberation, not death.
death at, oh,
Yeah,
okay,
so
okay.
he was trying to see life, as Sir pointed out, has a sense of eternity in it. So the question of death was not a very troubling question for
Oh,
him.
I thought maybe it
Yeah.
was an event in life. He thought like it is a
Death is
kind
not
of,
an event in life.
it is
So
It
not
is
an,
not an event in life.
not an event in life.
okay, it is
That is
not
the
an
statement
event.
of the Tractatus.
Yes.
Acha, acha.
Yes.
And
That
fear
was,
of death for him is a sign of false
Huh.
on spiritual life. False life, he says, but it must
Yes.
be unethical, on spiritual life,
he
not a
was
good
a,
life.
he was
Yeah.
a true Christian. He was a, in
Yes,
spirit, he was a true Christian, totally, I think, because he was
Yes.
talking of afterlife and talking like how
Yeah.
you explained the spiritual solace he was talking about. So I think he was a true Christian in spirit. I do not have
yes.
any such question, Ranjan. It was a wonderful hearing from you about the
Thank you.
unwritten part. We usually do not hear this. I mean, we are not accustomed to this sort of reading of Tractatus. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ranjan. I have one question. It's not a question, just from your talk, it made me very easy to understand the whole Tractatus and the periphery. Always I wonder why Wittgenstein was not explicitly talk about religion, like the way he talks about language and other things. What made him? I found most of the writings, but explicitly he has not written about religions. So could you just let me?
He has a lecture on ethics. There is a discussion on religion, isn't it?
That is
In
true.
fact, the lecture on ethics begins with the
Religious
discussion
belief.
on
Religious
Religious
belief is
religious belief.
discussed.
Yeah. So even the Putnam has also written on it. Commented and elaborated it in his writings. So
I think
there are
Ratikant
many
has a
people have.
question. Ratikant has a question like this. I think I reformulate that. Why is not why did he not write a book on ethics? A book on
Religion.
ethics and religion.
And religion.
That may be one of his queries.
Yes, sir.
He was concerned with religion, as you can see, and there is one statement in the Tractatus only about God, that God doesn't reveal Himself in the world. That sums up his.
Yeah, in fact, I read James Clerk, Tractatus in Context, the introduction. Wittgenstein's last student is some Hizab. I forgot his full name. The Hizab is the surname. So Hizab's dissertation was on religion. So that was,
Okay.
So his last, he was actually struggling to put it possibly, or all throughout his life, but he was deeply religious. So he lived a deeply religious life. So
He lived religion.
Yeah.
though he didn't write much
Much.
Yes.
about religion.
So that
So
will inspire all of us
because
starting to
no,
read.
I was very Jewish philosophy, a way of life. This is Hilary Putnam's one of the books where I read that paper in the Putnam seminar here, if you recollect. So in there, Putnam, taken Reason Week, Martin Buber, Levinas, and one who is not a Jew but has a Jewish ancestry, that is Wittgenstein. Then how these people, I mean, these thinkers, lived a true religious life. So, and how difficult it is. Putnam says living a religious life is indeed a difficult one. So that is how he has put it. It's not easy to live a religious life. Even Sri Ramakrishna Dev says in one of his discourse that people say that whether you have seen God or realized God or something like that. To this question, he says that as if to live a religious life is easy. It's not that easy. So it
Correct.
takes I mean, it's really difficult life to become religious in your everyday life. So
Similarly, to be ethical is also very difficult.
yes, so
Yeah.
But we
I
cannot
think
live
for
without that
him there is no such distinction between ethics and
Yeah.
religion.
religion.
They go together. Yes.
Priyambada?
Professor Sarkar has.
Yeah,
Uh,
Priyambada? Yeah.
yes,
Yes, please speak.
want to, I just want to join the conversation,
Yeah,
like
please.
replying Ratikan's query. Why didn't he write much on religion? Because it seems that he clubbed more or less ethics, aesthetics, and religion together, and he considered them as transcendental, and as and they are not something within the world, so you cannot really talk about them sensibly in sensible language. So it's you can only talk about relative judgments about God and the supernatural, but not the absolute kind of thing. So that is why he thought that these are the things that we cannot really sensibly talk about or write about. But these are not something which are insignificant. Rather, like in a notebook's entry where he says that God is how things stand, and how things stand is God. That is, he wanted to mean that it's not that this factual world and the divine world, they are exclusive of each other. If you can develop yourself, if you can train yourself to adopt a kind of viewing sub specie eternity, which Ranjan had also mentioned, then only you can see that whatever is there, that is also God's creation, or you can see it with divine light. Then you have this kind of sort of uh, mm, pantheistic view about the world. But if you confine yourself to the mundane world, then God definitely does not reveal himself in this sensible world. Uh, mm, is it all right, Ranjan?
Yeah, it is indeed. I mean, yeah, that is the spirit of Wittgenstein's thought. Thank you for putting it explicitly.
Ranjit bhai, Ranjit, hello. You can
Ranjit
come and
bhai,
join the discussion.
I think
Yasushi
he had
has a question.
left
Achha,
actually.
yeah. Okay, okay. So, Yasushi,
Hello, sir.
So,
hello?
Alok,
You
Yes.
can
You
ask
want to
after
be?
Professor Maruyama. I think Professor Maruyama is also saying something.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so let me go first. Well, thank you very much for your talk. So my question is kind of go beyond Tractatus itself, but I'd love to know how do you interpret or what do you think later Wittgenstein took the unwritten part of Tractatus, and also what did Wittgenstein think the fact that Wittgenstein, well, early Wittgenstein did not write the unwritten part. So later Wittgenstein somehow reject or denied Tractatus, well, logical or philosophical part of Tractatus. Then I wonder how Ranjan interprets, as a later Wittgenstein. So how did later Wittgenstein take the unwritten part of Tractatus, and also why did Wittgenstein didn't write the unwritten part?
yeah, uh, thank you. Yeah, that is a difficult question. Yes, I never thought about it as to see why he did not care to take um, what was unwritten here in Tractatus, and possibly he could have continued to write and elaborate upon it in the later works. But if you considered say his lecture on ethics and a religious belief um, as later works, so he was deeply involved in many such things. But um, I think so. That is one point, but not exclusively in PI. So I need to really look at it. Why he did not write about ethics in PI? Uh, Rather, he was more concerned with language, form of life, um, etc. I mean, so why he was, but he was definitely critical of, now in a broad, um, if you put that, if one sees continuity in both early as well as later philosophy, then this question may not arise, because he thought that is a philosophy is a continuous one. Only when we think that they are two different types of philosophy, maybe this question will be very, very significant. um, but if we see in terms of continuity, then may not be, and that may not be um, right, because he has already spoken about in other writings like Culture and Value, or notebooks entries, or in the lecture of ethics. So in all these he has said no something. So you have, if we see in terms of continuity, then one may not find that gap which your question is raising. Uh, but I think the answer is not that simple to your question. So one has to look at it very deeply into this question. Thank you for raising this. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just budge in here, if you
Yeah. Yeah.
don't mind?
Yes.
Uh, I was wondering while thinking about Yashuzi's question that uh, it's true that Wittgenstein would not distinguish in his later writings between sensible and nonsensible, between what is sayable and not sayable, that is what we one can write or what one cannot write. He has dissolved, he has dismantled this distinction, all right, but uh, there are things which he takes as hinges, as something, as something which you cannot really justify, rather which are the basis for justification. Now, could it be that some of these unwritten things, which he thinks you cannot really put it in sensible language, get transformed into those things that we take for certain, for granted, before we go on deliberating something, be it on religion, be it on transcendence, be it on ethics, and be it on knowledge. Uh, I don't know, I was wondering in this way.
Okay. Uh, Alok, you had something to share?
Yes, sir. Uh, so my query as well as observation is like that. When we look at the Wittgenstein Tractatus, the question is always whether it is concerning empirical or transcendental, sayable or showable. But the question is what I understand. First of all, it is all about the life, which is very much precisely, we can say, the existential. So, in this scenario, I can say the what Wittgenstein tries to solve the philosophical problems, which are also pertaining to our life as well as mundane world. So, all puzzles met are existential in a sense. So, the point is that what also Professor Ratikant Panda has said. So, regarding religion or regarding logic or ethics as well as the world. So, what Wittgenstein takes as a key to unlock the any kind of puzzlement, to solve or resolve the puzzlement. Should we take it is this key is none other than the language? Sir, kindly light upon this.
Yeah, I mean, yes, language is central to his philosophical discourse. He has been right in the beginning. Um, he is trying to do that in Tractatus as well as, and more explicitly in Letter of Wittgenstein in philosophical investigation. But yes, problem is existential, but the not. So, for example, if somebody asks this to you, um, referring to whether it is primarily logical or linguistic. No, the issues in the Tractatus was primarily logical or linguistic. So that debate of logical and linguistic language, logic and language, it's not an existential problem that way, no. But when we try to understand life as a whole, um, and ask some ethical question or religious, try to see it from an eternal point of view, what is the meaning of life, what is value, what is the value of this existence, what is death, and all these questions. I mean, that those questions are definitely um has an existential import. So, um, is not it? I think, but yes, he is trying to bring language to the forefront of discourse in Tractatus. This has been already discussed by many speakers here in this forum. Some speakers emphasize on logic, that how he wanted to put logic at the forefront. Some speakers have highlighted that, how language was important for him, and logic would take care of itself. So that idea, he's not giving up logic, but he's trying to show that language is central to philosophical discourse, and that also continues in later Wittgenstein as well. So that is there. So his concern, language is there, but how language would be the key to entry, and I do not know. If you uh, say have no concern for willingness, I mean your will, or thinking, I mean these are all very important. I don't know whether language there is actually making any sense when we I mean we are not, I'm not saying that language is not I mean there at all, the role of language, but I'm saying that a willing subject, a willing self, or a thinking self is very important, particularly when we talk about action, how to live a good life, particularly only when we talk about commitment, perseverance, all that, obligations. I think there, the willing subject or the willing self is more important.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir,
Vikrant, I wanted to say.
Vikrant has a question. He has written it on the chat box.
Yes, I mean, if you look at, what is history to me, and mine is the first and the only world. I mean, how does it matter really when it comes um, to this question of philosophical questions? Philosophical questions were eternal questions. What is the meaning of life? What is liberation, say, for example? That's not a historical question. What is the meaning of life is not a historical question. No? I don't think it is a historical question. This question will remain whether there are wars happening or not. Um, this the question about life and its meaning will will remain significant. So, what is history to me? Mine is the first and the only world reflected on the fact that it has solipsisposition. He finally broke with, after his conversation with Frederick Wiseman around. I want some reflection on this. So I don't think Wittgenstein never understood this question. I do not know. I do not know. These are. I don't really know what you are trying to say. tell us.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, please.
Yes, I just want to know. It's a very simple thing. Just what do you consider? What do you think? Which part, I mean, is more important? Was more important to Wittgenstein at that point of time, the written portion or the unwritten portion?
I think it was both. From a pragmatic point of view, he wanted that text to be published. So the written part was favorably considered by Russell. So he knew that Russell will approve only this, not the other one. So he was practical that it should go to the limelight. But at the private correspondence with his friends, so he was trying to tell them that how the other part is important. So the written part, in fact, carries the gist of it, but not all of it. Yeah. Am I clear to you? I mean,
Yes, yes, thank you.
because there are aphorisms about ethics. So there are aphorism about how what is the role of philosophy, and there are discussion about ethics and aesthetics, how life has to be seen from the subspecies eternities. So that part, you know, in essence, some of them are there, but to look at it more profoundly, he wanted possibly that the text should not lose its profound meaning. So therefore, he was trying to convey to his friends that the unwritten part is very significant. So I think that was his concern.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you.
Are there any more questions?
If not, then we can close now.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, everyone, for your valuable time and this question, and thanks to Professor Pradhan for his enlightening elaboration
you.
on many concepts. Yeah, it's
Thank you
benefited.
very much.
Yes,
Thank you all.
And
thank you.
thanks, Ranjan,